After 20 years, my adopted daughter found out I wasn't her real dad. My divorced wife decided to tell her our long-kept secret after I refused to give her half of my properties after the divorce. Shockingly, my adopted daughter chose her side and decided to leave with her. She said, "I am old enough to know that you are wicked for refusing to accept Mom's offer." I didn't fight back. A few weeks later, the unexpected happened. I will tell you everything. Before I share this story, I want to ask you something. How many stories have you listened to that made you feel something, and then you just scrolled past without subscribing? If you're here again, about to dive into another piece of someone's real, broken, and honest life, maybe this is the one where you stop just listening and start supporting. So before we begin, take a second. Like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs a reminder that choosing yourself doesn't make you the villain. Now let me tell you what really happened when the daughter I raised for 20 years walked away. I always believed fatherhood would be the thing that defined me. Not my job, not my house, not even my marriage, but being a dad. I was the kind of man who imagined early mornings making pancakes in a half-tied robe, messy hair and flour on the counter. I pictured myself clapping the loudest at school plays, struggling to braid hair before church, and leaving work early for dentist appointments. My dreams weren't glamorous, but they were mine. They felt real, earned, like something that could fill up the cracks that life had left behind in me. So when my wife suggested adoption, I didn't hesitate, not because I didn't believe we could conceive, but because I believed her. I thought we were a team. I thought she was hurting too. God help me. I thought she wanted a child as badly as I did. But that was the first lie, or maybe the first one I allowed myself to believe. We tried for years to have a child. I went to appointments, I took vitamins, I prayed in secret like a man ashamed of his desperation. Every month, I watched her face fall when the test came back negative. Or at least I thought that's what the expression was. Disappointment, sadness, grief. Now I know better. She was just playing her part, keeping up the act. And when enough time had passed, she came to me and said softly, "Let's just adopt. I don't want to keep torturing ourselves." I thought she was being selfless. Turns out, she was just being strategic. What I didn't know at the time was that she'd been having an affair. Not a one-time mistake, not a fling. An actual, long-term, full-hearted betrayal with someone she claimed was just a friend. I didn't find out until years later. But that's how she got away with it. That's how she controlled the narrative. She convinced me the problem was me. And in my guilt, I clung harder to the only solution she offered. I remember the day we brought our daughter home like it was yesterday. She was wrapped in a sunflower yellow blanket, her little fists curled tight, like she was already bracing for the world. The agency handed her over with a folder of paperwork and a checklist, like she was a pet we'd adopted. But I didn't see any of that. I saw a future. I saw birthday parties and scraped knees and middle-of-the-night lullabies. I didn't think about the fact that she wasn't mine by blood. I didn't care. I was holding my daughter. And from that moment on, every breath I took was for her. I fed her, bathed her, changed her, stayed up with her when she had colic and sat silently with her during her first heartbreak. My wife drifted further away with each passing year, and I compensated by doubling down on being a father. I thought if I just gave enough love, it would be enough for both parents. I thought I could protect her from the emptiness I saw behind her mother's eyes. The years went by quickly. Don't they always? First steps turned into school drop-offs, which turned into sleepovers and soccer games and awkward teenage silences. She became a smart, strong-willed young woman, fiercely independent. I used to beam with pride whenever someone told me she had my posture, or that we shared the same dry sense of humor. I never corrected them. It didn't matter to me that we didn't share DNA. What mattered was that I was the one who stayed. I was the one who chose her. Every day, through tantrums and report cards, through whispered secrets and shouted arguments. I never once stopped choosing her. Even when her mother started threatening divorce. Even when the woman I married became a stranger who criticized everything I did. Even when I started sleeping in the guest room. The divorce didn't shock me. What shocked me was how she waited until the ink was dry to start calculating what she thought she was owed. She didn't cry. She didn't mourn. She called her lawyer. She wanted half of everything. My house, my investments, the small vacation cabin I bought with my bonus 10 years ago. I refused, not out of spite, but out of principle. She had given up on our marriage a decade before she filed. I wasn't going to reward her for that. That's when she decided to destroy what little I had left. She sat our daughter down and told her the truth. Not with grace. Not with sensitivity. She weaponized it. Made it sound like I had been hiding it out of shame. Made it sound like the reason she wasn't getting more money was because I was cruel, ungrateful, selfish. I wasn't in the room when it happened, but I saw the aftermath the next day. She came into the kitchen while I was brewing coffee. She didn't say good morning. She just stood there, arms folded, jaw tight. "I know," she said, her voice hard and cold. "I know you're not my real dad. And I'm old enough to know that you're wicked for refusing to accept Mom's offer." I stood there, holding the coffee pot midair, not sure if I'd heard her right. Her words were like ice water down my spine. Not because she knew, but because of how easily she discarded everything we had. I didn't argue, didn't beg. I just nodded slowly, put the pot down, and said, "Then go ahead. Make your decision." And she did. She walked out with a single duffel bag. Didn't look back. It felt like someone had ripped the air out of my lungs. I sat at the kitchen table for hours that day, just staring at the spot where she had stood. 20 years. 20 years of birthdays and hospital visits, and staying up late to help her cram for finals. 20 years of love so unconditional, it blinded me to her mother's manipulation. And it all ended with one sentence. One accusation. One choice. She didn't just leave me. She chose someone else. And I let her. I always thought divorce would be loud. Screaming matches, broken dishes, slammed doors. But ours was quiet, surgical, even. By the time the papers were drawn up, there was no fight left in me. The only thing I had left worth protecting was my dignity and the home I'd built. She didn't cry, didn't ask for a second chance. She just sat across the table from me, legs crossed, eyes dry, as if she were closing a business deal instead of ending a marriage. The woman I once waited hand and foot on, the woman I cooked Sunday meals for, the woman who once laid her head on my chest and said she wanted to grow old with me, was now asking for 50% of everything like she'd earned it. She said it was her right, said she'd sacrificed her best years. I nearly laughed. She hadn't sacrificed a damn thing. I was the one who bent myself backward trying to make her happy while she carried on an affair behind my back and let me believe I was the one who couldn't give her a child. The audacity of her entitlement felt like a second betrayal layered over the first. I didn't say much in those meetings. My lawyer spoke for me, thankfully, because I don't think I could have trusted myself to get through them without losing my temper. I was a man who had worked 40 years in the same company, who saved diligently, who didn't buy the flashy car, who never took vacations I couldn't afford. Every dollar in my account was earned through sacrifice. Late nights, skipped meals, birthdays spent at the office so my daughter could have everything she needed. And now here was my ex-wife, a woman who hadn't contributed to a single mortgage payment in over a decade, demanding half. As if she were a partner. As if she hadn't spent our final years as roommates at best and emotional strangers at worst. I told her no. Flat out. Not half. Not close. I offered her a fair settlement, enough for her to live comfortably, but not enough to reward her betrayal. She didn't take it well. I should have known she wouldn't go down quietly. That's not her nature. She was never one to lose gracefully. When charm failed her, she weaponized guilt. And when guilt stopped working, she went nuclear. That's when she told our daughter. She waited until I left for a work trip, just a short overnight conference in the next state, and sat her down. I don't know exactly what she said, but I know it wasn't kind. Knowing my ex, she probably painted herself as the victim, made it sound like I lied to both of them, like I kept this massive secret out of shame or pride. She spun the narrative to make it seem like I was a cold-hearted miser who didn't want to share what belonged to the family. But she didn't mention the affair. She didn't mention the years of emotional neglect. She didn't tell our daughter that she was the reason we adopted in the first place, that she had betrayed me long before I ever refused to sign those property papers. When I returned the next evening, my daughter was waiting. Not with tears, not with confusion, but with righteous fury. Her face was hard, eyes sharp like she was looking at a stranger instead of the man who raised her. She didn't ease into it. No warm-up. No can we talk. She just stood in the hallway and said it plain. I know. My heart dropped. I opened my mouth to speak, to ask what she meant, but she cut me off. I know you're not my real dad, and I'm old enough to know you're wicked for refusing to accept Mom's offer. The words hit me like a car crash. It wasn't just that she knew. I always suspected the day would come. It was the venom in her voice, the way she threw 20 years of love, of bedtime stories and Christmas mornings, into the fire without blinking. She didn't ask why. She didn't want my side. She'd already chosen hers. I didn't fight her. I didn't plead. I didn't remind her of the nights I stayed up with her when she had the flu or the mornings I made her favorite French toast when she had a big exam. I just looked at her, really looked at her, and realized in that moment, she wasn't the little girl I raised. She was a woman now, and like her mother, she had learned to weaponize emotion for gain. So I smiled, not out of joy or sarcasm, but out of finality. A closing chapter. And I said, then go ahead. Make your decision. She left that night, packed a duffel bag, took the spare car keys, and walked out. She didn't even hug me goodbye. The silence afterward was worse than the fight could have been. For days, I walked through the house like a ghost. Her room still smelled like her hair products. Her sandals still lay by the front door. I didn't touch anything. I didn't tell anyone at work. I just moved through the days like a man underwater, unable to breathe but too tired to swim. I kept thinking she'd call, that she'd text, that she'd say, "I'm sorry, Dad." I was angry. I didn't mean it. But she didn't. She didn't reach out at all. Not a single word. And the longer the silence stretched, the deeper the wound cut. I started packing her things a week later. Not out of spite, but because I needed to reclaim my space. I needed to remind myself that I wasn't just a man who'd been used and discarded. I was still a father, even if the child I raised no longer saw me that way. I folded her clothes, boxed up her books, took down the photos, except one. A picture of us at the beach when she was 9, her arms around my neck, sand in her curls, both of us laughing like the world couldn't touch us. I kept that photo on my nightstand. A reminder that it wasn't all a lie. That once, we had been real. Grief doesn't always come with tears. Sometimes it settles into the bones quietly, like humidity on an old house. Subtle, invisible, but deeply destructive. That's how it felt waking up the next morning. Not devastated. Not in shock. Just hollow. Her room was still exactly the same. Bed unmade. Hoodie draped across the back of her chair. Perfume still lingering in the air like a memory that refused to leave. I stood in the doorway for what must have been an hour, just staring, daring myself to walk in. But I couldn't, not yet. It felt like walking into a shrine, like I had buried something in there and wasn't ready to exhume it. So I shut the door instead, quietly, and stood there listening to the silence press in around me. The first thing I did, strangely enough, was cancel her bank card. It felt cold at first, almost punitive. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it was about closure. That card represented more than just access to money. It symbolized trust. Access. A door I had kept open for her since she was 16. Anytime she needed gas, or groceries, or wanted to buy herself something nice, that card was there. And I never questioned it. Because she was my daughter. Because I loved her. Because I wanted her to feel supported even when she didn't ask. But that was the thing. I had been supporting someone who no longer believed in me. Who chose to believe I was wicked because it suited the story her mother told. So I logged into my bank account, found her profile, and clicked deactivate. My hands shook a little, I won't lie. But when it was done, I sat back in my chair and felt something unexpected, relief. The next few days were filled with those small, brutal acts of separation. I sold the car she used to drive, the old Corolla I had gifted her when she turned 18. She'd left it in the driveway without even asking if she could keep it. It still had a half-empty water bottle in the cup holder and her favorite pair of sunglasses in the glove box. I drove it to a dealership, signed it over, and walked home in the heat, my legs aching with each step. I donated some of her clothes, boxed up the rest, and stacked everything in the garage. Not out of spite, but because I couldn't bear to see her everywhere and nowhere all at once. Grief is strange like that. It makes you do the necessary things even when your heart isn't ready. It wasn't until the following weekend that I told someone what had happened. My neighbor, Roland, had lived across the street from me for over 20 years. Widower. Vietnam vet. The kind of man who always offered you a cold beer and unsolicited advice. We weren't close, but we respected each other. I ran into him while mowing the lawn, and he asked how the girls were. I hesitated for a moment, then just told him. Not everything, but enough. About the divorce. About the fight. About my daughter walking out. Roland didn't interrupt. He just leaned on the fence, listening with those quiet, watchful eyes. When I finished, he nodded slowly and said, "You raised her. That counts for something. But don't let her crawl back when the money runs out. That's not love. That's survival." His words hit me harder than I expected. He wasn't angry for me. He wasn't surprised. He was disappointed for me. And that somehow hurt worse. That night, I sat on the back porch with a glass of bourbon, watching the sun dip below the trees. I thought about everything Roland said. About survival versus love. About the cost of being chosen only when it's convenient. I had spent 20 years being her safe place. Her emotional safety net. The man she came to when the world was unfair. I had never once turned her away. Not when she crashed the car. Not when she failed her first college class. Not when she showed up crying after her first heartbreak. I was always there. Always. And yet the first time I said no, to her mother, not even to her, she left like none of it mattered. Like I was just another obstacle in the way of her comfort. There's something deeply humiliating about being discarded by someone you considered family, especially when you chose them. Adoption isn't a half measure. It's not a backup plan. When I signed those papers, when I held her for the first time, I became her father in every way that mattered. I didn't love her as if she were my own. She was my own. She still is, in some haunted corner of my heart. But love doesn't survive on history alone. It needs trust, reciprocity, loyalty, and somewhere along the way, I had become the only one doing the choosing. That realization settled over me slowly, like ash after a fire. Painful, final, cold. I stopped checking my phone after that. She hadn't called, hadn't texted, and I stopped expecting her to. The first week, I held on to hope. The second week, I started to let it go. By the third, I had deleted her contact entirely. Not out of cruelty, but because I couldn't keep staring at a name that only brought me pain. I told myself it was self-preservation, boundaries. But part of me knew it was something deeper. A kind of quiet mourning for the life I thought I had. The daughter I thought I knew. I told myself if she ever wanted to come back, she'd find a way. But the door wouldn't be open like before. She would have to knock. And this time, I wasn't going to open it unless I truly believed she understood the cost. It was a Tuesday when she called. Late afternoon. I was folding laundry. An odd habit I'd picked up in her absence. Something about the order and quiet helped soothe the noise in my chest. The phone buzzed against the kitchen counter. Screen lit up with an unknown number. I don't know what made me answer. Maybe curiosity. Maybe something more pathetic, like hope. But the moment I heard her voice, soft, shaky, almost rehearsed, I knew exactly who it was. "Dad?" she asked, like the words still belonged to her. My hand tightened on the towel I was folding. For a second, I didn't speak. Just listened to the silence on her end. The kind of silence filled with expectation. The kind that hoped memory was enough to overwrite betrayal. "Hi," I said finally, but there was no warmth in it. Just recognition. And that was enough to make her start crying. She didn't start with an apology. Not really. She started with excuses. How her mom had twisted things. How she didn't know the full story. How she thought I was being unfair. I let her talk. I didn't interrupt. I'd spent years listening to that voice. Soft when she wanted something. Sharp when she didn't get it. It was a voice I knew better than my own. And yet, hearing it now, I felt nothing. Not anger. Not relief. Just distance. Like I was listening to a stranger pretending to be someone I used to love. When she paused to breathe, I asked her where she was staying. She said with a friend, but it wasn't working out. Then came the real reason for the call. "I miss being home," she said. "I miss the quiet. My room. The car. You." It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. Like she was listing amenities. Like she missed a hotel, not a home. I didn't respond right away. I walked to the window, phone still pressed to my ear, and stared out at the backyard. The one-eyed mowed, planted, watered with my own hands. The same yard where she used to run barefoot as a child, chasing the dog we had for a brief, joyful year before he got sick. That yard had seen more of our family's truth than most people ever would. You left, I said finally, my voice low. You didn't just leave. You threw everything I gave you in my face and called me wicked. And now you miss the comfort I provided. She didn't answer right away. I could hear her breathing. Shallow. Unsteady. She wasn't used to me being like this. I'd always been the safe one. The soft one. The one who forgave too quickly. Not anymore. She came by the next day. Showed up unannounced, like old times, like she still had keys. But the locks had been changed, and I met her at the door. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but in presence. Like someone who had burned a bridge and realized too late she was still on the wrong side of it. She wore the same denim jacket I bought her for her 18th birthday. It used to make me smile when she wore it. Now it just made me tired. Can we talk? She asked. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. She blinked, clearly expecting to be let in. I didn't move. You can say what you need to say, I told her. She hesitated, then launched into another round of practiced regret. How she didn't understand. How she was angry. How she thought I'd be okay with her siding with her mother because that's what kids do during divorce. It took everything in me not to laugh. Not because it was funny, but because of how absurd it all sounded. Kids make mistakes, I said quietly. But you're not a kid. You're a grown woman. And grown women live with their choices. She started crying again, louder this time. She reached for me, but I stepped back. No, I said firmly. You don't get to touch me and pretend nothing happened. You don't get to walk back into comfort like you didn't set it all on fire. Her mouth opened, but I didn't let her speak. You weren't tricked. You weren't confused. You made a decision. And now you want to come back to the car, the bank cards, the space I gave you. Not because you miss me, but because you miss the benefits. There it was. The truth. The raw, uncomfortable truth that no one wants to admit when they come crawling back. She didn't miss the father. She missed the lifestyle, the convenience, the safety net. But she had cut all those ropes the moment she chose her mother's version of the story over mine. And I wasn't going to play the fool again. I wasn't going to be the soft place to land for someone who saw me as nothing more than a fallback plan. She stood there for a few more minutes, sobbing, begging, bargaining. I listened in silence, then finally said, I'm not angry. I'm not holding a grudge. But you don't get to come back and pretend nothing happened. This house isn't a revolving door. And I'm not an ATM with a memory problem. Eventually, she left. I didn't watch her walk away. I just went back inside, closed the door, and leaned against it for a long time. My legs trembled, not because I was unsure, but because of how much strength it took to stand firm. That was the moment I realized how deeply I'd been used. Not just by her, but by both of them. My wife had always been the obvious manipulator. But my daughter, my sweet girl who I raised, who I loved unconditionally, had become a weapon in her mother's war. And now, when the dust had settled and the money dried up, she came back hoping I would forget the wounds because of shared memories. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. Some lines, once crossed, are permanent. That night, I sat alone on the back porch again, bourbon in hand, stars overhead. The silence felt different now, not heavy, not hollow, just honest. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like a father abandoned. I felt like a man reclaiming his peace. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't even particularly sad. I just finally understood that love without loyalty is a dangerous thing. It makes you blind, makes you vulnerable, and worst of all, it convinces you that self-sacrifice is a virtue. But it isn't. Not when it empties you. Not when it leaves you standing at your own front door, refusing to let your own child inside. The hardest part wasn't watching her walk away. It wasn't even listening to her cry on my doorstep, asking for things she once took for granted. No, the hardest part came in the days that followed, when the house settled into a silence that wasn't bitter anymore, just resolved. I thought the ache in my chest would come back. I thought I'd feel guilt, regret, maybe even doubt. But none of that happened. What came instead was something slower, deeper, peace. A quiet kind of peace, the kind that grows when you finally stop trying to fix something that was never yours to carry alone. And it was in that silence that I finally understood I hadn't just shut her out that day. I had closed the last door I was ever going to close for her. Not to punish her, not to prove a point, but to save what was left of me. The next few days, she called again. A string of voicemails, each one more desperate than the last. At first, it was apologies. Not the kind that came from deep reflection, but the kind that were strung together to unlock a door. Dad, I didn't mean what I said. I was just angry. You don't know what Mom was telling me. Then the tone shifted, accusatory, biting, laced with self-pity. You're really going to let this go over money? You abandoned me over a misunderstanding. Do you even love me anymore? That last one stuck with me longer than I'd like to admit. Not because I questioned my love, but because I finally realized how little she understood what love actually meant. To her, love was transactional, conditional, something that could be withdrawn and replaced, depending on which parent offered the better package. But to me, love had meant sacrifice. Years of it. Silent, consistent, thankless sacrifice. And I wasn't going to let that be used against me any longer. She tried one last time to see me in person. Showed up at my work. I'd never expected her to go that far. I was leaving the office, walking through the parking lot toward my car, when I saw her standing by the driver's side. She looked smaller again, clothes baggy, makeup smudged, as if life had finally stopped cushioning her fall. Can we just talk, please? She asked, voice low, almost embarrassed. I looked around, making sure no co-workers were lingering nearby, and approached slowly. You've already said what you needed to say, I replied. She shook her head. No, I need to explain. So I listened. Again, she talked about how hard things had been with her mom, how she realized she had made a mistake, how she missed the structure, the kindness, the support I used to give. I just want to come back, she said, barely above a whisper. Please. I looked at her for a long time, and then I said something I hadn't planned to say, something that came from somewhere deeper than hurt. You want to come back to the version of me that gave you everything. But that man, he doesn't exist anymore. You helped bury him. She blinked, stunned, as if I'd slapped her. But it was the truth. I had spent so long giving without expectation that I didn't realize how completely I had emptied myself for her. And when she chose to believe the worst about me, the absolute worst, without even asking for my side, something inside me broke. Not in a loud, dramatic way. It broke quietly, permanently, like a tree branch snapping in the middle of the night, too tired to keep holding weight it was never meant to bear. I told her goodbye, not with cruelty, but with finality. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just got in my car and drove away. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I didn't need to. I already knew what I'd see. A young woman who had mistaken unconditional love for endless tolerance, and a father who finally chose himself. That night, when I got home, I deleted her last batch of voicemails. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I wanted to stop reopening the wound. Each message was a scratch on skin that had only just begun to scab over. I didn't need reminders. The pain had already carved itself into memory. Over the next week, I began redoing the house. Small things, really, painted her old room a soft gray, replaced the old curtains, moved my bookshelves in there. I turned the space into a reading room. Not out of spite, but because I needed to reclaim what I'd lost. I deserved to have a space that wasn't haunted. For years, that room had been her sanctuary. Now it was mine. I sat there every evening with a book and a cup of tea, breathing in the stillness. And for the first time, I didn't feel the ache of her absence. I felt something stronger. The relief of no longer being held hostage by hope. One evening, my old friend Roland came over. He brought cigars and 2 lawn chairs, and we sat in the backyard watching the sun dip low. He didn't ask for details. He didn't need to. He just passed me a cigar and said, "Some people don't come back to apologize. They come back because life out there didn't give them the comfort they expected, and they assume you'll still be standing where they left you." I nodded. She thought I'd wait. I said. Roland gave a low chuckle, took a puff, and replied, "That's the thing about bridges, man. You can only burn them once." It's strange how silence can start to feel like company. The kind of silence that doesn't echo or accuse, but settles around you like a well-worn coat. That's what my life became in the weeks after I shut the last door. The calls stopped. The voicemails dried up. There were no more unexpected visits. And for the first time in a long time, I woke up without the tightness in my chest. I brewed coffee for one. I read in silence. I walked around the house and didn't feel haunted. There was no longer a question mark hanging over my every movement. No lingering hope that maybe she'd come back the right way. Not for money, not for convenience, not for comfort, but for me. But I finally accepted that she never would. And what's more, I didn't want her to. Not anymore. Because for the first time in my life, I realized something no one had ever said out loud. I deserved to be chosen too. That sentence stayed with me. I said it out loud one morning while shaving, almost to test how it sounded. I deserved to be chosen too. Not because I was perfect, not because I never made mistakes, but because I showed up, because I stayed, because I loved without keeping score and sacrificed without asking for praise. I spent years giving, sometimes more than I had. And when the time came for someone to choose me, they didn't hesitate to walk away. That kind of realization doesn't leave you bitter, it leaves you changed. You start to question every time you gave someone a second chance they didn't earn. Every time you downplayed your own pain just to keep the peace. Every time you let someone treat your loyalty like an entitlement. And I had done that too many times. I was done doing it again. I started doing little things for myself. I went back to the cabin I bought all those years ago, the one my ex-wife once called a waste of money. It was small, tucked in the woods near a quiet lake, but it felt like sanctuary. I spent a weekend there alone, with nothing but a pile of books and a thermos of coffee. I sat on the porch and listened to the wind move through the trees, and for the first time in months, I smiled without needing a reason. No one needed anything from me. No one expected me to explain or justify my peace. I was just a man in a chair, watching the world go on without demanding his pain as payment. That's when I realized healing doesn't always come from confrontation. Sometimes it comes from distance, from knowing when to stop proving your worth to people who never saw it in the first place. A few weeks later, I ran into an old friend at the grocery store. Linda, widowed for almost a decade, warm eyes, quick wit, and a laugh that could light up a funeral. We chatted by the produce section like no time had passed. She asked how I'd been. I hesitated, then gave her the short version. Divorce, fallout, quiet house. She didn't pity me. She didn't gasp or offer the usual empty condolences. She just touched my arm and said, "You still have love to give. Don't let what happened convince you otherwise." That stuck with me. Not because I was looking for romance, but because I had forgotten what it felt like to be seen without conditions. It reminded me that I wasn't broken, just bruised. And bruises heal. Eventually, I took down the photo from my nightstand, the one of her and me at the beach. It wasn't an angry decision. I didn't smash the frame or toss it in the trash. I simply placed it in a drawer, gently, like retiring a well-loved book. I didn't need it anymore. I didn't need to keep proving to myself that the love I gave had been real. I knew it had been. I lived it. I breathed it every single day for 20 years. And just because it ended in silence didn't mean it was wasted. It simply meant the chapter had closed. Not every story gets a clean ending. Some just stop, and you learn to live in the quiet that follows. Every now and then, people ask if I've heard from her. The answer is no, and I no longer wait for the answer to be different. Because I no longer measure the success of my fatherhood by whether she comes back. I measure it by the integrity with which I gave it. I know who I was. I know what I gave. And if the only thing she remembers is the man who said no one time after decades of yes, then that's not on me. That's on her. I will always love the version of her who danced in the kitchen in mismatched socks. The little girl who made me friendship bracelets out of yarn and begged me to let her stay up 10 more minutes. That girl was mine. But the woman who left? She was someone else entirely. And now, I live simply. I read more. Cook for one. Keep the house clean. Sometimes I take long drives with no destination. Just me, the open road, and my thoughts. And they're no longer angry. They're no longer tangled in questions like why me, or what did I do wrong. They're quiet, steady, clear. I think about how long I tried to be everything to everyone. How long I allowed love to be a one-way street. Not anymore. I've learned to protect my peace like I used to protect my family. Fiercely, without apology. Because in the end, that's the kind of father I always was. And the kind of man I still am. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to stand firm in your boundaries, even when it meant losing someone you loved, then you're not alone. Sometimes, Choosing yourself is the most painful and most powerful thing you can do. If you felt this chapter of my life, please share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe for more true stories about family, betrayal, and the strength it takes to let go. Your support helps these stories reach the people who need them most. See you soon in the next one.